right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan, it is good to be back. We are going to kick off here part two of our top 10 Eastern Conference player rankings. If you guys have not checked out part one, go do that. I think it was a fun episode. Obviously, a lot of debates. We were way too aligned per usual. I'm hoping there'll be a little bit more disagreement here, but we'll see. As I said on the last show, this is really we come into this blind. We don't compare lists ahead of time, and it's usually it's more fun that way. So, with that though, Ryan, there is a little bit of league news kind of unfolding as we are jumping on here to record this, and it is a three-team trade where Peyton Watson lands in Cleveland, making the jump from Denver over to the Eastern Conference. Max Strus on his way to the Clippers. And then it looks like draft compensation going to the Nuggets. So I certainly want to talk about your thoughts on Watson joining Cleveland. What does that do? Are they better? Are they worse? And then I'm curious if the Strus move to the Clippers has any bearing on the Benedict Mathurin situation in your mind. So just your initial reaction as this is kind of unfolding in real time.
Yeah, reacting to the Watson news, we had talked a lot on this show just how Cleveland was really quiet in the offseason, and it kind of felt like they put a lot of the eggs in the LeBron basket, and rightfully so with all his connections there. But after that fell through, they hadn't done much. And you could argue that about a few Eastern Conference teams. The Pistons haven't made a ton of flashy moves. Heck, the Pacers hadn't, although you would argue that their move was at the deadline last year. And so the Cavs clearly had kind of their secondary plan outside LeBron, and honestly, I think it was a pretty impressive deal for them. Now they basically have no picks, I think, left to trade. They're now hard capped on how many picks they've traded over the years to get guys like Mitchell and now Watson. So that kind of pins them into this roster a little bit, but Watson's a heck of a player, and this is a big loss for Denver. Watson is a guy who averaged close to 15 points last year on nearly 50% shooting, over 40% from deep, and I think even maybe more importantly for Cleveland, they get the wing defender that they've been trying to get for a while. They've tried to pigeonhole a few guys in that spot. They've made deals there. They tried to put Strus in that spot, who had good moments, but 6'8", Watson is a much better defender at this position. And so their starting five is definitely improved. If you're looking at Allen, Mobley, and Watson, those guys can all defend. Like they're all solid defensive players and, have their games offensively. I still think the limitation for the Cavs is going to be neither Mitchell or Harden can defend at all. So you can just always routinely attack those guys. As much as they're going to try to shoot things into Mobley and Alley. And their bench still, just doesn't excite me. Harold, Sam Harrell or Merrill. I'm just keep saying Harold because I was going to say Mario Hazonia now, if you believe in his comeback at all. And so I think they lack some depth and still have glaring defensive needs. But if you're a Cavs fan, you're definitely happy after this deal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a player. He fits the prototype 3-and-D kind of wing that this is not a Trey Murphy the third level player.
Yep.
Hasn't done it, only been in the league 4 years, but it's kind of that archetype. Somebody that can obviously defend, has length, athletic, and then, as you said, has shot the ball really well from outside range. Not a ton of volume. I had to go and look and see. It's about 3.5 attempts per game last year. So I'll be curious to see what that does as the Cavs really, they lose some shooting here with Strus.
Yeah.
Strus was one of their guys. I don't want to say lose shooting. They lose volume of shooting.
Yeah.
Watson figures or factors to be a shooter on this team with where he shot the 3-point, from a percentage perspective. But we always know that there's that balance of as your volume goes up, if he's shooting 5, 6, 7 times a game or being asked to, now, I don't know if that's going to be the case. You got Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. There's a lot of trigger happiness in that, backcourt, if you will. But I think the same thing rings true. That was where my thought was, Ryan, about what we talked on last episode. The backcourt in Cleveland is a defensive liability. Your front court now becomes bona fide. But we saw, the DeAndre Hunter experience didn't really work out. He was sort of pegged to be their sixth man. He was going to be that big wing defender. I think Cleveland gets marginally better because I do think Strus had limitations, but Strus was a culture guy, an energy guy, a streaky shooter that carried them. I mean, everybody remembers the meme from our series where he's celebrating with like a minute to go because he hit what he thought was that 3-point dagger. And then the man that does the real dagger, that's
Yeah.
Tyrese Haliburton, big balls, all of that. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up. But
They
here
know.
nor
They
there,
know.
they should know at this point. So no, I think. Listen, I think that the Cavs get better. I don't want to downplay it. Strus was a money consideration. I'm not totally surprised at the dollars. I think I saw, what was it, 4 years, 88 million,
Yeah.
something like that.
It's the right number for him.
Correct. It's something that I think, as I look at it from our lens, okay, we're talking about, we signed Aaron Nesmith to the extension, whatever that was last year, and he ends up, right around that $20 million mark. I think it's fair. It's what
Yeah.
you're going to have to pay for a 6'8" wing in this league that can shoot and defend. So I am curious. I asked you a little bit about the
Yeah.
Clippers front. Does this do anything on is Mathurin still a target? Do you think he ends up in LA? Obviously, it looks like that trade's going to go through. So you're adding Brandon Ingram, now Strus. What does that look like to you?
Well, I can tell you one thing: Mathurin ain't getting $20 million right now.
Oh,
If
no,
Watson
no.
goes for 22-ish a year, I'm sure that it's front loaded, back loaded, however it works out. Mathurin's not close to the level of player that Peyton Watson is, and I know you can look at the numbers and maybe say it a little different, but defensively, it's a different enemy, and just the way he plays, efficiency wise, Peyton Watson has him. So I do think this changes it for the Clippers a little bit. Now they have a lot of guards between getting Wagler, Strus is in there. Garland's already not a great defender. So, like, adding him into that mix, other than just trying to acquire talent and maybe using him as a trade piece next season, doesn't make a lot of sense for them. So, I don't know the ins and outs. I wouldn't be surprised if it turns into a sign and trade at some point, or Mathurin getting on that qualifying offer is kind of the two rumors left out there for him. Seems like there's a few suitors. I think the Pelicans have been name dropped. The Bulls have been name dropped. The Bulls actually make sense for me on somebody who'd probably come in and overpay him just because that's what the Bulls do. I don't know exactly where their cap sheet is right now, so maybe that's possible. Maybe it's not. But I think there's a good chance he is either on a qualifying offer or taking a smaller deal on some sort of sign and trade.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that the teams that you've heard in the rumor mill for Benedict Mathurin, they're not teams that have any prospect of winning,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunately for a player like Ben. I don't think that there's a lot of teams that have chemistry, that have a clear fit from their roster perspective, are looking to plug a high usage guy who's streaky and not a plus defender. And that's why he's not going to get anything close to 22 million. And I know there's a faction of Pacers fandom that's not going to like to hear that, but he's probably signing for something closer to TJ McConnell money at this point. And betting on himself, so to speak. Maybe he gets 15 million. Like you said, the Bulls could come in, Pelicans overpay, whatever. But there's a reason that there hasn't been an offer sheet signed yet. So it'll be interesting. Frankly, depending upon how that number looks, there's a part of me that would have said, you probably disagree with this, but if his contract value is somewhere around the combined value of Jarris Walker and Ben Shepherd, there's an argument that adding Ben wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We know that we can use him in spots, but not as the sixth man. He's not that in this league anymore. And so I just thought it was interesting that LA adds a wing while the Mathurin contract is still pending. And we'll see where it all goes from a Clippers perspective. But that is not what the headline of this episode is about. This is, in fact, part 2 of our Eastern Conference top 10 player rankings. Felt that we had to get to the news first, but I want to pick up this conversation. And just to recap, Ryan and I were almost entirely aligned in part 1. We had Pascal Siakam at 10. We had Tyrese Maxey at 9, Donovan Mitchell at 8, and we shared Jaylen Brown at 6. The only delineation was Ryan had Tyrese Haliburton at 7, and I had Jalen Brunson at 7. So, spoiler alert, you're going to hear those names again at least once, unless Ryan's ready to come back and swap at this point because he's feeling sorry for Tyrese being so low. I'm not anticipating that, but I'm going to let you kick us off. Go to
Yep.
5. Where are you at?
Starting at 5, I went with Kawhi Leonard. And now, when we get into this top 5, I probably moved these guys around 10 times. Weirdly enough, the first 5 or the bottom 5 were a little bit easier to me, where these guys, it's hard because Kawhi Leonard on a given night is the best player in basketball. I mean, and people say that actually that's not a crazy statement. We saw what he did last year when he was healthy and playing well. He's lost a little step defensively, yes, but he's still a very high plus defender in this league, can lock in. And offensively, when he's got it going, he might be the best person in the league to just go get a bucket. His mid-range game is unconscious. We saw bad example. We saw what he did in the All-Star game. Like, he can get nuclear, and he just plays the game right. He's a decent playmaker, a good rebounder. Like, he's done a lot. And when this guy is healthy, he's going to be in a system with the Toronto Raptors where it makes a lot of sense. He's going to have a lot of defenders around him, maybe not quite as much shooting as he wants, but still a solid amount of shooting around him, a good big, and they'll lean into the defensive aspect and then lean on him to go get some big buckets. And when the offense slows down and late shot clock, that's going to be his role, but he's not going to be asked to do everything. They've got the playmakers in place. They've got rebounders in place. They got defenders in place. He'll often not even be guarding the most talented wing or forward. That's going to be Scotty, who made an all defensive team last year. So I had a time where he was number 2 on this list. And I just think the only reason that kept me back is just knowing the injury history. It's hard to kind of rank guys where it's like, is he going to be healthy? Because a lot of guys on these lists kind of have injury concerns now. But because his is the most prevalent, I ended up putting him at 5.
Ryan, it's so funny. I'm going to get to Kawhi here in a minute. We're starting this show in a much better place. I do not have Kawhi. I think Kawhi is a hell of a player, and I do have him on this list. And I'll wait to kind of dive into my take on him when we get to him in the rankings. But of the 5 names that I do have written down here, 4 of them have serious injury concerns.
Correct.
Okay, and that is an interesting place to be. And it was something that I thought about when I was going into these rankings. I'm like, 4 of these top 5 have injuries. So I'm kind of just saying it's going to be a net neutral, right? Not that it doesn't matter, because we obviously know very close to home how injuries can absolutely derail, a player and a season for that matter. But I'm going to go 5 here and kick mine off. I had Cade Cunningham. Okay. And I'm going to say this because I know that there's probably a lot of people that think that this is too low, and I'm going to assume you have him higher than this. Cade Cunningham should have been in the MVP conversation at a much higher level last year. Number 1 seed in the East in the regular season. The guy put up gaudy stats, almost 24 points, 5.5 rebounds, 9.9 assists. Shot it okay, not the most efficient, not a great outside shooter, but can hit the big shot when he needs to. I think he's a dog. I think, he just has, he's kind of really, JB Bickerstaff, I think, came from Cleveland, got to Detroit and looked around and said, I've got some dogs here, and we're going to lean into this physicality, toughness, hard-nosed style of play. And I think Cade is the perfect lead guy for that. I think their team struggled in the postseason this year, in large part because outside of his playmaking, it falls really short. And so I do think some of his assist numbers, if you look at the progression through his career, scoring's, it was not as high early. He's definitely a little bit higher now, but I think the playmaking is by virtue of there is nobody else, right? Like, we've seen where Tyrese can have 15, 20 assists if he wants. He's moving the ball. Other guys, Nembhard averages high assists, Siakam high assists. There's none of that going on in Detroit, right? And so you have to kind of balance some of these numbers out to get a fuller picture. My reason for not having him higher on this list is simply the postseason lack of success the last couple of years. And I know, you go back 2 years ago, that Knicks series, you can talk about officiating. You can talk about late game stuff that could have flipped that series the other way. And frankly, I think you said this on our show that we recorded a couple days ago. Had the Knicks matched up against the Pistons this year, I think it's a totally different ball game from an Eastern Conference layout. I actually like how the Pistons match up against New York because of their size and physicality. They could go a little bit more toe-to-toe. But you have to look at what you've seen. Cade almost blew it in the 1-8 matchup to, basically Orlando, right?
Yeah.
And that was a series that they find themselves down 1-3. Yes, they claw out, they win. And then they lose to the Cavs. And I don't know. I'm not that high on the Cavs. I don't think the Cavs really had a great answer from a defensive perspective for Cade, and he just wasn't able to get it done. And then we saw the Cavs get swept by New York. And so really, to me, this comes down to lack of postseason success. I understand he's had a bad team around him for the very early part of his career. But I'm just curious how much he's elevating everybody else around him. And I know that the argument will be, look at Jalen Duren. He made him an all-star, but he disappeared. What was that about? And so Cade's a hell of a player. I really like him, but as the lead offensive engine on my team, I think there is a better point guard in this conference. And that's why I have Cade at 5. The numbers are gaudy. We talked about that a lot on the last show, that the stats look really impressive. MVP candidate, regular season champs, postseason success has not been there. He's 5 for me.
I had Cade at one point as high as 2 on my list.
Oh my goodness.
But he does finish at 4. And this is why
Okay.
I said I had a lot of jockeying with these guys. So we're not too far off. Cade is just really impressive. And I almost will take a different look to how you just kind of analyze what they've done in the postseason. I think it's wildly impressive where Cade has gotten this roster. I mean, for them to be a 60-win team, to make it to, Eastern Conference semis, like, I look down that roster, and yes, there are some guys. Jalen Duren, you saw what he showed his limitations in the postseason. Duncan Robinson, how much do you really like that? Tobias Harris was the laughing stock of the league at one point. Asir Thompson, hell of a defender, cannot shoot the ball to save his life. Like, he is working with, no backup point guard. I know Jenkins kind of came on the scene, but no real true playmaker outside of him on the team. So he had to do a lot, and he is able to, because I think he is a great playmaker, and his size and playmaking is just rare. He is a thick dude. That guy is every bit of 6'8", 220. I don't know what they list him at, but he is strong, plays solid defense, good leader. And I think what he's done in Detroit has been really impressive. And so I started kind of doing this argument in my head as I was going, as if you put Kawhi in Detroit last year, I just don't think that they are better. Now, I know that's taking one thing. You could maybe argue the reverse, that if Kawhi, if you put Cade on the Raptors, maybe they're worse. But I look at that team and just have been really impressed with what he did. And he would scare me. In the playoffs, he's somebody you're going to have to be worried about. And truthfully, I don't love what the Pistons are doing. And that's a good thing right now, because it's likely going to keep him kind of at the back of some of these lists and not in people's forefront because of what happened in the playoffs. But yeah, sure, he had some disappearing games, but he's still in the playoffs, averaged, 28 points, 5 rebounds, and 7.5 assists. Like, he was doing it all offensively for them and trying to keep them afloat. So I had him at 4.
I have a question for you as we segue into my 4th overall ranking. If you put Tyrese Haliburton on the Pistons last year, full strength, are they better? Can he carry them further than Cade Cunningham?
Offensively, they're probably better. Yeah, you're right. You're getting better looks. He's going to be able to probably take advantage of the pick and roll with Duren even more than Cade did. You're probably getting a little bit more from the lob game, quick pace. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Here's what I'm saying. This is hard because it's not just positional rankings, right?
Yeah.
Cade gives you more all around. And we made the argument yesterday or whenever the hell that podcast was, that in the situation of a comparison like Pascal Siakam and Karl Anthony Towns, right? Siakam gives you the two-way element. Cade is more of a two-way player than Tyrese Haliburton. I'm not arguing that. And he's a better scorer on paper. I think a lot of this comes down to how much do you value what the team does, right? Because I think Tyrese is the ultimate cheat code for elevating players around him. And I just think that there is a lot of value there. It's a loaded question. I know that when you talk to NBA experts and people that watch the games, most people are, if you poll that, 8 out of 10 people are going to say Cade's better than Tyrese Haliburton. Fair enough. I've got Tyrese at 4 on the list. That's why I'm asking. And so I'm kind of getting into this part of my rankings. And here's the case that I'll try and make. Okay. I think Tyrese is wildly misunderstood in the modern black and white NBA analysis, which is, does he put the ball in the basket? Right? Can he score? What is his bag? How does it look? Tyrese is not a sexy athlete. His handle is a little crab dribble, try to get downhill. He's not Kyrie Irving at a point guard. He is not this, big bodied guy like obviously Cade gonna barrel in, gonna out physical you. And shot a little bit of the jerk, it's kind of a funky release. There's a lot of things about Tyrese that don't scream NBA superstar. Okay. But what does scream NBA superstar to me, at least, is you watch multiple guys come into this roster, whether it's Nemhard Neesmith, whether it's Siakam, whether it's a Miles Turner, whether it's an Obi Toppin, even a Mathurin to a certain degree. Everybody gets so much better. He finds a way to get the best out of all of the guys around him. And to me, that is a superstar quality. It is very rare. It is not something that we see in, the I guess across the landscape of the NBA. We've talked about great players on this list, guys like Donovan Mitchell, guys like Tyrese Maxey. They have gifts that Tyrese couldn't dream of from a scoring, 3-level, athleticism, speed, burst, but they don't have the ability that he does. And I think those sort of athleticism, scoring, speed, those are things that NBA fans are conditioned to look out for, right? They jump off the screen. What Tyrese does is different. It's a little more nuanced. I think, yes, I'm biased, but I've also had a up close and personal, viewing platform of this since he's arrived in Indiana. And I look at the postseason success. We've said it a number of times. We've never lost a postseason series that this guy has been healthy to finish. I think there's something real about that. We've beaten good teams in the postseason. I'm not going to say great teams, but he's outplayed other guards. He's outplayed, and I know Dame Lillard's had up and downs, but we beat him twice. I know there was a torn Achilles in that series last year, but the first series when it was Dame, we beat Dame, okay? Outperformed him. He had the Pat Bev shot in that series, clutch moments, etc. He's outperformed Jalen Brunson multiple times in the postseason. I just think you have to start to look at some of these comparisons. I can't put him ahead of the next guys because I think at their best, they are literally unstoppable at times. And that's why I've reserved him for the 4th slot. But I don't think that there is a point guard better in this conference, probably better in this league than Tyrese Haliburton. And it's not because of his 18-9 that he averages. It's because he takes New York's trash for 2 second-round picks, Obi Toppin. He takes the Aaron Neesmith paperclip. He takes the Miles Turner to another level. And that to me is so undervalued in this league. So I know you had him at 7. I'm trying to make the hometown case for a guy that I think is an absolute game changer. He's coming off a torn Achilles. I have no idea what that's going to look like. Cade may outplay him, bar none this year. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, you always do a good job selling me on it because I want to move him up immediately. The elevating players piece just can't be understated. And I'll even go give you, because I already gave my Tyrese reasoning and why I had him at 7. And that's not an insulting number. This is the East is stacked right now. But I'll give you a comparison that you kind of win is he's a little bit like Peyton Manning. And I know Colts fans will love to hear that, but Peyton wasn't the sexy athlete either. He just read the game and elevated guys like a Brandon Stokely and a Dallas Clark. These guys who on another team, just throw them on the Commanders, don't do what he does. And that's what Tyrese has done. And oh, by the way, he's had a ton of playoff success. Like the 2 playoffs he's really been in, he went to the Eastern Conference Finals both time, and obviously we know Game 7 of the finals. And I think it's crazy, at least having arguments with other people, how that just doesn't seem to matter. But with everybody else, that's the argument. They always be like, well, he doesn't have any playoff success. He hasn't done. I mean, compare him to Anthony Edwards' playoff success. Like, yeah, Anthony Edwards has had solid, but Tyrese has had better. Like it's not not comparable really. And so I know the numbers I think that's the whole piece is he averaged 18-9 in the playoffs. That doesn't jump out. but we're the best offensive team in the playoffs. And don't tell me you look down our roster and think outside Tyrese Haliburton, we had the best roster out there offensively. He got those guys to play in that system, build them up, and it was impressive. So we've both revealed 4 and 5, right? So now we're moving to 3. And I will keep this one as short as anybody I've named on the list, and that because it's Jalen Brunson. And if I have to compliment him as why I have 3, I'm going to vomit on the mic. So I will just say Jalen Brunson earned the 3 spot for me because one, I talked about Kawhi's mid-range game being, nearly unstoppable. Only one that probably rivals him right now, Brunson, SGA. Those guys have elite ability to just get looks. Just won the championship, has had a lot of playoff success as well. We know that. We've taken him out, but he's still gotten through many rounds. And he is just an impressive guy of how he navigates the court, able to draw fouls, albeit fouls that we don't like most of the time. But it's hard to deny that talent, and I am done giving Jalen Brunson any compliments because he will be dethroned again this year.
Well, I agree with the last statement, and I was pretty hard on Brunson, here in the part 1 of this series. I'll give you this, okay? He won a title this year. He went to New York. He was underappreciated in Dallas. I think that much is clear. He takes the massive pay cut to allow them to essentially stack the roster, and that in and of itself is just an amazing thing for an NBA player to do, to leave, $100 million in essence on the table. And he did it. And he got his, it was the Nova Knicks there when it was, they had Matthew, whatever his name was. I almost said Matthew Dellavedova. That is not who it was. Dante DiVincenzo. But Brunson is wildly talented. I understand why you have him at 3. I can't get there because I am probably just too biased against the Knicks. I understand it. Many in the league will applaud this guy. I think there's way too many defensive shortcomings, and I think the story will be rewritten again this year. I hope that we get a chance at him, and if we do, I'm going to go into that series with 100% confidence that we have the best point guard and the best team. And I hope we get an opportunity to let the results speak for themselves. At 3, Ryan, I did have Kawhi Leonard. Okay. I have watched this guy play a number of times over the years in person. He is way bigger than you think. So physical, so strong. You talk about getting to spots in the mid range, but his, the 3-level element is there. I mean, he shoots it well from the outside. The defensive prowess is obviously, this is a defensive player of the year guy. It's dropped off a little bit later in his career, he's just a player that I feel like always finds a way. He just finds a way to make his team better, to get the stop when he needs it, to get the bucket when he needs it. I mean, I think about those all-star games that we saw this year. I know that the all-star game is basically a clown show, but he couldn't miss. I mean, it was so impressive what you see. And when he is healthy, and I've already said it on this show, a lot of, 4 of these 5 guys I'm talking about tonight have major health concerns. But when he is healthy, he transforms Toronto from kind of an afterthought to he's clearly their best player, and they are a problem in the East. Their physicality and size with Scotty Barnes and others, Barrett and Murray Boyles, that's going to be an interesting dynamic to deal with. And I frankly expect him to have a little bit of a renewed energy coming into Toronto. It's a place that he's won before, obviously getting the title there. And I just think he is a game changer that some of these other guys on this list simply aren't yet. And he's done it at the highest level, winning in multiple places throughout his career. So I had Kawhi at 3. You had Brunson. Let me go for 2 because you've led each of these. And this is another guy that probably, I mean, at one point, if this was 2 years ago, I may have had him 1. I've got Jayson Tatum here. And I know that, listen, he's coming off of an Achilles, and we saw a little bit of up and down play in the dozen-ish games. I think it was 10 or 12 games somewhere in there that he played upon his return last year. There were some highs, there were some lows. Frankly, it was a feat in and of itself just to get back on the court in the timeline that he did and play meaningful minutes. But make no mistake about it, he is an absolute problem. We saw it in that series now 3 years ago, Eastern Conference Finals, where Tyrese went down. Jayson Tatum, Jalen Brown, take your pick. We didn't have an answer. I mean, we were talking back then about Isaiah Jackson being able to switch and the mobile big and all that. With his length and his ability to put the ball on the floor, the only thing that holds him back for me on this list, frankly, I think he settles for jumpers way too much.
Yeah.
But the rest of the game is there. He is a matchup nightmare with his length. I think he's an underrated defender, frankly, because he does give you some size and foot speed at that position. And I just think he is a player that if he comes back into this next season healthy, Jalen Brown or not, Boston is still a problem. I think as a lead player, he's somebody that you're absolutely game planning around. And so I have Tatum at 2.
I had Tatum too as well, so we'll get to one here shortly, but pretty much have to echo what you said. And you mentioned Kawhi Leonard in person, bigger body, Jayson Tatum in person, bigger body. And we've kind of roundabout on this East, a lot of this playoff success between, Kawhi, Cade, Tyrese, and then even Brunson. And the funny thing is, if you're Jayson Tatum, you kind of laugh because he has dominated the East for a long time. Been to a couple finals, been to many Eastern Conference finals. I mean, he was going to Eastern Conference finals back when I was a freshman in college. Like, this guy has been winning since he came in the league. And yeah, a lot of that has been, he's had a lot of good coaching, a lot great front office, great players. I know that Jaylen Brown won technically that finals MVP, but that was a coin toss. And through this run that the Celtics have been really the most dominant team in the East, the favorite in the East. I mean, you think of FanDuel lines over the years, the Celtics always are 1 or 2. And that's basically because Jayson Tatum is just that talented. And I agree with you. The weakness is he settles in a lot of big moments on jumpers and step back threes. But when he puts his head down, he's a heck of an athlete, can get to the rim, hit mid-rangers. And we say he settles for those jumpers. When those things are falling, get out of the building because you can't defend him at that point. He's too big. He's too fast. And yeah, I think the injury concern with a lot of these guys up here is valid, but I don't think it's a far stretch to know why maybe I'm pretty optimistic that he's going to come back from this Achilles tear 100% coming into next year. And coming back in 9 or 10 months, what he did was already insane. And, was he 100%? No, but if you caught him on a random night, you wouldn't be like, what's up with Jayson Tatum? Like, it wasn't that egregious by any means. So I expect a full bounce back, and I would not be surprised if we did this again next year and Jayson Tatum was number 1 on both of our lists.
And I did this exercise. I agree with that, by the way, your last comment there. Very well could be, particularly because of who we have both at number 1. And there's so many question marks there. But a lot of the reason I'm going with that ranking is based on past performance, not necessarily current expectation. Here nor there. Something that's interesting just around Tatum and Boston's success on a more macro level. As I was navigating Twitter and getting rage baited on some things around the Knicks and Pacers and all that, there are about a handful of teams. I think it's 6 or 7 teams over the last 5 years that have multiple conference finals appearances. Pacers are on that list, OKC, the Knicks. Boston is the only team with 3. 3 of the last 5 years, they have conference finals appearances. Now, they're a little bit further back on the timeline. But to your point, when this guy's been at full strength, he has dominated this conference. And I do think that because of the LeBron move and the Giannis move and the Kawhi move, and the Knicks just won it. Like, there is this certainly sleeping on Boston element. Jaylen Brown is out, but there is a very real world scenario where it is addition by subtraction particularly for Jayson Tatum's game, right? Paul George can be more of a catch and shoot player, doesn't have to be on the ball as much. If he stays healthy, it opens some things up for them in a different way where they're not trying to balance this usage problem, okay? Because Derek White's still an on-ball guy. Peyton Pritchard's still an on-ball guy for the most part. So I'll be very curious to see how Boston performs from an expectations perspective. They got better in the front court. No mistake about it. Mitchell Robinson is a game changer. So I think people are, to your point, sleeping on Tatum a little bit. The injury, Brown's gone. they've kind of been out of the conversation with all these other, headliney moves being made. Be very curious to see where that comes, next spring, and if they're not competing for one of the higher seeds in the conference. That brings us to number one, and this is a guy that, for a Pacers fan base that's listening to this, very polarizing. A lot of history here with this player over the last couple of years. But as I look at what this list is all about, and this is game changer, this is dominate a game, this is absolute freak, it is none other than the Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo, because he's just one of one. There are no other players in the league right now that are anything close to him. I understand, okay, Wemby can shoot, and Giannis's physical presence is that is much more forceful than Wembanyama. Wemby has the length, athleticism. Yeah, you can put the ball on the floor. Giannis is still an absolute force to be dealt with. You heard recently, we mentioned Tyrese's comments on the Number on the Board podcast. He talked about Giannis and how he is just the one guy in the league that you can game plan entirely for. And if he has it going, it doesn't matter because he's dropping 50 whenever he wants to. Now, health has been a major concern with his availability. Motivation, I would say, over the last couple of years in Milwaukee has been a little questionable. There was a lot of diva stuff, dramatic last year. Oh, I love Milwaukee. These reports aren't coming from me, even though they are coming from your representatives who work for you and you pay them. Those things are red flags to me when guys start to make excuses for why winning hasn't happened. And make no mistake about it, Giannis has not won at a high level in quite some time. Frankly, since they won it in, I believe it was 21 or whatever it was against the Suns. For whatever reason, right? The Dame experiment didn't work out. Health has been a concern, but it hasn't been there. I still think he is the most dominant presence. He is, in my mind, the greatest comparison I can make is like a modern day Shaq. There's just not an answer for what he brings. And it's not the same kind of player as Shaq. I get that. But this is an MVP caliber player. He's going to Miami. Maybe it's the fresh start that he needs. We'll see how the fit with Bam works. We'll see if they can get, they're rumored for Klay Thompson and they need some more shooting on that roster. A lot of question marks still to be answered, but I couldn't go anywhere else with this top slot.
Yeah, it was hard. And when I looked back, I didn't quite remember this, but it just stood out on the page so much. In that playoff series, Giannis, we played in the Pacers. He averaged 33, 15, and 7 assists on 60% from the field. Like, there's nobody in the league who can do that number with that efficiency. Maybe outside like Embiid, but Embiid can't stay healthy and hasn't ever done it consistently through the playoffs. And so when you look at those numbers, there's just not another guy in the East who can dominate a game quite like that. And I do hear you that the playoff success has dropped. A lot of that was the talent around Giannis just kept getting worse and worse. Chris Middleton started to age out of his career. They lost Drew Holiday, obviously trying to make the Dame fit, but it never really fit. Even Brook Lopez, we saw Miles Turner outplay Brook Lopez late. Kuzma is a ghost on the court in big games. And so Giannis was having to do so much with this team and still was so efficient, was basically their point guard, their lead scorer, their best defender. And he is just a different, body that you alluded to where you're scared of him everywhere. Who's supposed to guard him? Pascal's a little too skinny. Nesmith's way too small. Hibbert's too slow. Like, there's just not a good or Hibbert. Geez, Miles Turner. Yeah, I love that dig. Actually, that one stays. Yeah, Hibbert would have been way too slow.
Verticality, dude.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. On the help side, maybe, but you put him on the perimeter, Giannis. That'd be a fun matchup. But neither here nor there. I've derailed my own. Giannis is just extraordinary. Now, the ironic part is I still don't think the Heat fit is great. It's better than the Bucks were last year. Obviously, I mean, the Bucks had basically fallen out of all their talent, didn't really have a runway. So he gets better with Bam and Wiggins and Mitchell, but still not a great fit. Doesn't think I think they're going to make a big run. I think I even made a prediction that they might not make the playoffs, which I would still stand by, which usually doesn't happen with the best player. But to what I said to Tatum, I would not be surprised if this is the last year he's number one. I just think with the injury concerns coming up, how his fit with the roster. If he goes another year without big playoff success, he'll be turning, I think, 32 or at the end of this season, something like that. Big guy, injury concern. They don't typically last as long. But with that said, if there's one guy that you were building around in the East right now to win a championship and you could put shooters and, guards and wings around him, I would choose Giannis.
Yeah, it's going to be that's what Miami has to be trying to do, right? And is there enough talent still on the board? Is there enough room alongside a Bam to try and make it work with some of the guys that you're pot committed on with a Wiggins and a Davion Mitchell and all that? I have long said I think Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the league. The success hasn't really been there for them, although Miami was one of those handful of teams that does have multiple conference finals appearances in the last 5 years. And Spo's got now probably the best, not probably, he has the best player he's had since the LeBron, Wade, Bosh era. Okay. And now it'll be very curious to see what he does with him. I always felt like post Budenholzer in Milwaukee, Giannis was maybe clamoring for a little more from a coaching perspective. I'm not trying to knock Doc Rivers, but it was very evident in those series that we went up against Doc. Rick Carlisle just coached circles around him and was always one step ahead of Doc's next move, whether it was point Giannis or removing Lopez from the starting lineup. I mean, he tried everything and it simply wasn't enough. And is that a Rivers Carlisle thing, or is it more just a Pacers or running them into the ground thing? And our style of basketball was a horrible matchup for Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And we forced guys like Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green, and others to beat us, and they just simply couldn't. But that stat line you put out for Giannis was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I mean, it passes the eye test because he was getting buckets left and right, and we didn't have an answer for him. It was just that in this league, if you can shoot and you can score with pace, you can keep up with guys that are putting a lot of points on the board and super efficient. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Giannis is a freak. He's an unbelievable player. I'm with you, though. His reign at the top is likely not for that much longer. And it'll be very interesting to see how this list shapes up over the coming years with, frankly, a lot of young talent still in this Eastern Conference that we've ran through. So, Ryan, I'll just kind of recap my list, okay? For me, I had Pascal Siakam at 10, Tyrese Maxey at 9, Donovan Mitchell at 8, Jalen Brunson 7, Jalen Brown 6, Cade Cunningham 5, Tyrese Haliburton 4, Kawhi Leonard 3, Jayson Tatum 2, Giannis Antetokounmpo 1.
Yep. I'll go mine real quick, just in reverse order. Siakam, Maxey, Mitchell, Haliburton, Brown, Leonard, Cunningham, Brunson, Tatum, Giannis.
Pacers fans, let us know where we got it right, where we got it wrong. Are we crazy? Is Haliburton way too high on my list? I hope I get some Homer fans that say he's not high enough, because you mentioned how some guys had moved around. I had him higher on this list. And I thought, okay, don't be so, Pacers Homer that you come off as just being ignorant to the reality that, yes, Tyrese is a phenomenal player. He does have some shortcomings, particularly. Although I'm going to say something in closing here, okay? And I don't think we talked about this enough. And I'm going to be very curious to see how this translates in this upcoming season. This has nothing to do with player rankings. It's just me. I had this thought while I was traveling to the airport today. Tyrese Haliburton played his best defense as an NBA player in the final 2.5 series of that finals run. We saw, frankly, a postseason transformation from him. I really thought starting in that Cavs series where he was picking and choosing his spots. I know Ty Jerome is not a name that's on anybody's radar. He was a 6-man of the year candidate that year and was on a tear coming in. This was the Cavs 64-win season. Tyrese D'd him up. Tyrese was switching on to Donovan Mitchell in certain cases. He was getting blocked shots and tips and deflections. I'm not sitting here saying that he is a perimeter isolation one-on-one defender. I thought Tyrese learned how to be a phenomenal team defender throughout that postseason run, and it was something that was extremely undervalued and off most people's radar. I'll be very curious to see how much of that is a limitation coming back from the Achilles, because we need him to be probably a net neutral defender
Yeah.
if we're going to go where this team wants to go. I don't know if you have a thought on that. If you don't, we can wrap up. But that's just something that I think is not talked about enough in Tyrese's case.
I had a delusional take with Tyrese that I wanted to get to. So you
Please.
segued in. I know you've been traveling today. Did you get a chance to see Christopher Mad
Yes.
Dog Russo's comments?
Yes, I
Which
did.
I'll just make a quick comment because Pacer fans took offense to this, as they should. If you haven't caught his comments, he's basically just calling Tyrese not that guy, that he doesn't deserve the national primetime game. But the ironic part of two things is to start his rant, he was talking about the podcast that Tyrese was on that we've mentioned a few times. And he opens it up by saying, well, I haven't watched the podcast. So there's your ESPN crew doing their homework. And I haven't watched, transparently, a lot of this Mad Dog Russo stuff. I don't know who really is tuning into the daily ESPN Sports Center bites anymore. It's just not really where the sports world is. And if you are, good for you. But it's been a long time since I've tuned into those shows. And it just shows exactly what everybody about the NBA is wrong. Because first, he wasn't calling out anybody. And second, he was that guy. Like, what are we even talking about? It was the single greatest clutch run of all time, only to fall short because of an Achilles tear. Like, everybody just overlooks that. If anybody else in the league hit the 4 shots that Tyrese did, if that was the Anthony Edwards, the Luka Doncic, any of these rising stars in the league, they would be all over him. But it's because it's Tyrese and his numbers don't flash and he's in Indiana that they just don't care. And he was so delusional and dumb, and it just continues to solidify ESPN's nonsense at this point.
Brian, I saw it. I agree with everything you said. He was mocking the Knicks shot where it hit off the back iron. Oh, so what? You hit one shot? No, he hit 4 shots. Okay, that were, I mean, whatever. We could go on and on and on. It was not only the most historic, improbable sequence of clutch playmaking, it was the most entertaining as a basketball fan to see these improbable scenarios play out that are just infinitesimal in terms of percentage odds, right? We talked about the FanDuel odds on the last show of us picking all these, ranks. We were so aligned. Yeah. The odds were millions to 1 that things would play out the way that they did, with time and score being what they were. And he delivered it time and time again. Whatever his name is, Mad Dog, was talking about, hey, we're going to lose that game 7. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Have you seen, and this is where it's mind-boggling. They don't watch our games. You talked about Roy Hibbert. They don't watch. He's famous for saying that quote. And it's so true. He has no idea that when Tyrese got off to those kind of starts, we won those games. Like, yeah. and everybody will, the whole thing is no Larry. Well, okay. But like, what was more impressive? Have you seen that graphic where the Pacers had the most difficult postseason run of anybody in the last 25 years based on strength of schedule and opponent and all that? Like, all of it just gets discredited because no Larry. Well, okay, but it's not the whole story. And yeah. Tyrese's point wasn't even, I think you said this, it's not just that it's New Orleans, it's that it's not home. Give us a home game, give us a national televised game. It's the whole thing. And the last thing I'll say, because you covered this, there was I don't even know who it was because I was watching it on Twitter and listening. There was somebody in the background talking about how there were better teams that the NBA could showcase. And the person in the back is going, and the Knicks. And I just want to be like, Tyrese owns the Knicks. Look at our postseason history with this team. What planet are you guys on? The idea that now the Knicks are just the greatest thing on earth, walk on water because they won this title, and we make it to Game 7 against a much tougher slate of opponents, and we have a torn Achilles that robs us of the opportunity. Okay, I'm not going to say a title, the opportunity to see that season through in its full extent, that somehow that must be wiped away. Nobody cares, no interest. And, we have to watch Jalen Brunson flop around like a fish out of water for opening night. It's puke. ESPN is puke. Listen to the Pacers post up. We'll get more delusional takes here as the season goes on. It's a segment that we need to commit to at a higher level here at the end because it is delusion abound across the league. I'm done. It's late. Ryan, anything else before we bring this one to a land? Pacers fans, appreciate you guys listening. As always, go Pacers.